Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever or whenever you happen to be listening to this. Thank you for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja based event and wedding photographer Tavishima Ayede. So, thanks for hanging on through the detour where we talked about Islamic banking and alternative forms of financing, basically, to see if they could be of any use to those of us in the wedding and the event space. And my opinion, for those of you who didn't catch the last episode, was that yes, it's a handy form of financing, but it only applies to sales contracts and lease financing and hire purchase and those kinds of agreements. So it would apply to those of us in the wedding and the event space. So for those of you who are decorators and you want to acquire, new trucks to haul your stuff around, or you want to buy new tables and chairs, or if you're a DJ and you want to get a new spin, what are they called? Are they decks or turntables or whatever it is? All the expensive equipment that we all use in the wedding and the event space. Or if you happen to be that wedding photographer who believes that if you buy that 2.3 million naira camera, that is going to make your business, really jump forward. So if that's your cup of tea, then yes, these sorts of financing options are available. And the bank that I happened to be talking with was Sterling Bank, people in their marketing department, and they're real nice folks. And I'm sure that if you would like to explore any of these ideas, they'll be willing to help you guys out. So I'm not going to rehash what our detour was yesterday. So if this is your first time listening, just scroll back one episode and you'll be able to get all the goodness from there. Now, for those of you who've been along for the ride so far, before I made that detour, we had been looking at the overarching conversation about whether you can influence potential customers to buy, and whether you should use any form of influence or pressure in getting people to buy. And I hope I've been able to convince you guys so far that rather than looking at how to influence them or pressure them into doing something, we're better off asking qualifying questions so that we can find out what their existing motivations are, because it'll be easier to get them to move along if we just ask questions, find out what the existing motivations are, and then align our sales pitch or our presentation or whatever it is you want to call it to align that marketing message with the motivations that are already there. And then we also looked at the second and related aspect of for those of you who already have a regular client base. So you did their wedding, maybe you did the naming ceremony. Should you pressurize them into doing more? Should you exert influence to get them to do more? And my answer was the same, and I hope you guys agree. Rather than looking for ways to pressurize, to cajole, to influence, or to beseech, or to beg, or whatever, you're better off asking qualifying questions to find out what their existing motivations are and then align with that. But for this second category of people, that's people who have already bought from us before, we explored some of the issues that now arise that you have to apply in that, you have to take into account in that process, and that's your follow-up game, basically. How you follow up and how you have customer service conversations and things of that nature. So for those of you who are listening for the first time, I'm not quite sure how many episodes back this is, so I'm just going to take a guess. So my guess is skip back maybe 4 or 5 episodes, and you'll be able to get the goodness from there. So for those of you who've been along for the ride so far, let's get moving. So now that we're done with that, there is something that I want to explore, which is kind of related to these two matters that I've spoken about so far. That's getting people to buy more, or getting your existing customers to buy more. You remember that I mentioned something about customer service conversations, and that's something that I want to impress upon a little bit more, because it is our prayer and it is our hope that when we cover someone's wedding, that when I shoot someone's wedding, I'm a wedding photographer, when you plan someone's wedding, when you MC the wedding, when you make the cake, or whatever it is that you do, when you handle the decorations, It is our hope and our prayer and our expectation that absolutely nothing will go wrong in the process and everybody will just come out singing our praises. So people will say, "Oh, Tavishima, you're a wonderful photographer, this and this and that and that." Or Kemi of XYZ wedding planning company, you were absolutely professional. Everybody was on time, people were clean, and people were courteous, and this and this. And that everybody would just sing our praise and it would be kumbaya and money, 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 money all the way. Now, unfortunately, sometimes things do go wrong, and that is what I want to get us to start averting our mind to. So, basically, the question: what to do when something goes wrong with the customer, or what to do when something goes wrong in the sales process. Now, before we do this, in my own opinion, some of you would disagree, but in my own opinion, I think in 90% of the cases, when problems occur, it is because usually there has been a failure in expectations. Now, let me repeat that. A lot of the problems that will happen will be because there has been a failure in expectations, not necessarily that there has been a failure in the product or the service. So, there are those rare situations where maybe you are not having a good day, so you are not on par, and so the wedding decoration that you did, I mean, you look at it and yourself, you know that, Kai, like this was a terrible job, this was a bad job, like what was I thinking? So there are times that these things happen. As a wedding photographer, you're not on point, and your mojo is just off that day, and so the photos you take are absolutely terrible. So there are times that happens, that there's a failure in product or service. But you'll find that most of the quarrel that you will have, most of the yawa that will gas, will not be because you have done a terrible job. It won't be because you have done a terrible job. It's because there are some expectations that were not met. There has been a failure in expectations. So, in my own case, for my wedding photography, I like to keep things. Keep things natural. I'm not heavy on the Photoshop. And so, if I have quarrels with my clients, that is one of the areas where it comes up. So, in the sales process, maybe because I was desperate, school fees is around the corner, I need some quick cash, and so I just agreed to the deal, even though I kind of suspect that, we're not aligned when it comes to tastes. Those are the kind of quarrels that will happen. And, the bride or the lady will now turn around and will say, see now, you didn't remove this pimple. Or you didn't remove my birthmark, or I'm a yellow girl now, but says you made my skin dark, and all those comments that arise. So you see that it's not because I've done a crappy job, it's just that the expectation was that the bride or the person who I had the portrait session with would have expected, a certain level of airbrushing, photoshopping, stuff like that. So it's been because in that case there's been a difference of expectation. I'm coming at this more from a naturalistic, photojournalistic, documentary style kind of thing, and then the person wants something that is, what's that word? She wants something that is a much more idealized version of herself, highly retouched, super edited, things like that. So those are where these problems, can occur. So as a wedding decorator, for instance, the mother of the bride says she wants something that is nice, simple, sophisticated, and elegant. But then you do something, maybe you don't understand the brief properly, and so she thinks that what you do is gaudy and in poor taste or commonplace or whatever. So these are the kind of things that happen. So let's disabuse our mind from the idea that if you make yourself a top-notch photographer, or if you make yourself a top-notch planner, or you make yourself a top-notch DJ, let's disabuse this idea from our mind that if we beef up on our technical skills, that quarrels won't happen. So, yes, we all have to be technically proficient, but most of the reasons why the quarrels will occur will be because there has been a failure of expectations. So they were expecting one thing, you didn't meet up with that, or you were expecting one thing and they didn't meet up with that. Maybe you weren't too clear on the price, So they assumed you said one thing, you assumed you said another, maybe your paperwork was not correct, and so at the end of the day, you think your money is short, and then y'all gas and you guys start quarreling. So failure of expectations, not necessarily failure of product or service. Now, these failures arise out of two main things, and I think that's what we should be paying attention to when we're trying to build our wedding practice and to become super successful as wedding and event professionals. So, number one, communication problems. In the example that I gave on the price thing, it's a communication problem. Maybe you don't use invoicing. I use invoicing and I try to make my invoices detailed. So, maybe I gave an invoice, but then the pricing element wasn't spelled out clearly enough over there. That could lead to a quarrel in the future. And then for those of you who do contracts, maybe the template you picked wasn't clear enough or was too unwieldy. There are lots of reasons why I might have communication problems, or sometimes something is said in passing. Let's say you're the wedding planner, you're sitting down, you have the first meeting with the bride and with Momsy, and you guys agree to a game plan, and everything is written out, and everybody agrees. But then, leading up to the wedding, you have phone calls, and you will agree to one or two changes, and you don't document those changes and send it to them to say, look, this is what we agreed to. Are we all cool that this is the new direction? You don't use those sorts of practices. Then it can lead to quarrel in the future because there has been a gap in communications. There's been communications problem. You guys agreed to one plan initially. You tried to vary the plan verbally over the phone later on, and you guys didn't document that. And then on the wedding day, we now have different sets of expectations, with Momsy thinking one thing like, didn't we agree to this? The bride thinking, no, actually we agreed to this. And then you, the wedding planner, are like, no, actually both of you are off because we had the conversation on the 20th of January that this is what we agreed to. So, communications problems. And then, the second one. Okay, I already mentioned the second one and harped on that quite a bit. That was product or service failure. But you will find that a lot of the time, it's communications problems that cause a lot of the yawa that we get into. So I think I've spent enough time exploring why this is an important issue and how these come about. So just remember that let's pay attention. Let's always have it at the back of the mind. Yes, we should be technically proficient and let's be on top of our games. Let's be on point. But just bear note that the chief quarrel happens because there's a failure in expectations, which might be undergirded by communications problems in the first place. So, in the next episode, we'll look into what to do when the shit hits the fan. So, you guys are done, you've executed, you've delivered on what you thought you were supposed to deliver on during the wedding, but people are not happy. There's a quarrel, there's disagreement over what you delivered, disagreement over money, disagreement over whether what you did was adequate or not. So in the next episode, we'll look into basically how we take things forward from that point. How do you take things forward from there when you have customer service incidents on your hand, when you're dealing with an unhappy customer? So thank you very much for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja-based event and wedding photographer Tavishima Anyede. I'll catch you guys on the next episode.